Imagine holding a penny in your hand worth more than a gold bar. Sounds unbelievable, right? These rare pennies are not just valuable, they're shocking, and they could be hiding in your pocket right now. Stay tuned to discover the mind-blowing truth behind these treasures. Hello, coin collectors. Welcome back to another exciting journey into the world of rare and valuable coins. If you love learning about the history, value, and stories behind some of the most interesting coins, then you're in for a treat today. We're diving deep into the 2009 Bicentennial copper penny, a coin that marks an incredible moment in American history. Grab your magnifying glass and let's take a closer look at this unique piece of American currency. In 2009, the United States Mint celebrated the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and what better way to commemorate this milestone than with a special edition of one of America's most beloved coins, the penny. But here's the twist, it wasn't just a typical penny. The Mint decided to give the penny a little makeover for the occasion, releasing a bicentennial copper penny that featured 4 new designs, each representing a different aspect of Lincoln's life and legacy. Now, we know Lincoln's face has graced the penny since 1909, but in 2009, things were about to get extra special. The bicentennial penny was released as part of a series to honor Lincoln's 200th birthday, and it wasn't just about the designs. This penny was minted in a special copper-plated zinc composition, which is what we're most familiar with today, but what makes this penny truly unique? Let's break it down. The 2009 Bicentennial copper penny featured 4 distinct designs, one for each quarter of the year. Each of these designs is a tribute to the different stages of Lincoln's life. The birth and early childhood design, first quarter. This features a log cabin, representing Lincoln's humble beginnings in a cabin in Kentucky. The inscription reads, "Birthplace of Abraham Lincoln," honoring the place where Lincoln took his first steps. The formative years design, second quarter. This design highlights Lincoln reading a book by candlelight. It's an illustration of the man who, despite lacking formal schooling, educated himself by reading the classics and law books. The professional life design, third quarter. This image showcases Lincoln in his Springfield, Illinois, law office. The inscription reads, "Professional life," celebrating his achievements as a self-taught lawyer. The presidency and legacy design, fourth quarter. Finally, we see an image of Lincoln delivering the Gettysburg Address at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Pennsylvania. This symbolizes Lincoln's leadership during the Civil War and his lasting impact on the country. Each of these designs tells a part of Lincoln's story, and they beautifully capture the essence of a man who shaped the future of America. But, there's more to this coin than just its artwork. Let's talk about what collectors really care about, value and rarity. As far as value goes, the 2009 Bicentennial copper penny isn't necessarily worth a lot of money when found in circulation. After all, it was minted in large quantities. However, that doesn't mean this coin doesn't hold special value. In fact, it's highly sought after by collectors who appreciate its historical significance. The standard 2009 penny typically only carries a face value of 1 cent, but if you happen to have one that's in mint condition, it could be worth slightly more. Some collectors have paid premiums for these pennies, especially those that are graded in uncirculated condition or even proof condition. What's more exciting is the possibility of mint errors. If you happen to find a 2009 penny with any noticeable mistakes, like a double die error or misstrikes, it could greatly increase the value. Some errors on these pennies have sold for much higher prices than you might expect. For example, a penny with a double die obverse error can fetch anywhere from $10 to $100 depending on its condition. Now, let's talk about collector demand. While the 2009 Bicentennial copper penny may not break the bank just yet, it's a coin that has steadily gained attention among numismatists and history enthusiasts alike. The unique designs, combined with Lincoln's timeless legacy, have made these pennies highly desirable for those looking to complete their collections. Moreover, as time passes, the demand for these pennies may continue to grow, particularly for those in exceptional condition or with rare minting errors. If you're serious about your coin collection, it's wise to hold on to any well-preserved 2009 pennies you come across. Here are some interesting facts that might just surprise you. Did you know that 2009 was the first year that the penny's design was changed in over 50 years? That's right. The last significant change to the penny was in 1959, when the reverse side was altered to feature the Lincoln Memorial. So, the 2009 Bicentennial penny is a pretty special piece of history. Also, production numbers for these pennies were high, with over 4 billion 2009 pennies being minted. This makes finding an uncirculated version of the coin a bit more challenging but not impossible. The final design of the penny, the one with Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address, was particularly symbolic. It wasn't just about celebrating a man, it was a message of freedom, unity, and equality, values that resonate deeply with Americans. In conclusion, the 2009 Bicentennial copper penny may not be worth thousands of dollars just yet, but it's a coin with undeniable historical and sentimental value. It represents a pivotal moment in American history and provides collectors with the opportunity to own a piece of that history. Whether you're a seasoned collector or just starting out, this coin is one that should not be overlooked. Keep an eye out for mint errors and well-preserved examples because, as time goes on, the value of these coins could increase. So, check your change, inspect those pennies closely, and who knows? You might just discover a hidden gem. We're stepping back in time, to the year 1960. Dwight Eisenhower was president, a gallon of gas cost 31 cents, and the U.S. Mint in Denver was busy striking millions of Lincoln pennies. But one small coin from that year, just one simple cent, could today be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. That's right. We're talking about the 1960 Lincoln copper penny. At first glance, it may look just like any other penny in your pocket change. But this coin has secrets, hidden in plain sight. Stick with me, because this story is worth every second. Let's start with the basics. This penny was minted in Denver, as shown by the tiny D under the date. Over 1.5 billion of these coins were struck in 1960. That's billion, with a B. So why is this common coin stirring up so much excitement among collectors? You see, 1960 wasn't just any year for the Lincoln cent. It was a transitional year, one that gave us two different date styles, the small date and the large date. And both were minted in Denver. Now, to the untrained eye, these differences are hard to spot. But collectors, they live for this kind of detail. The small date version has a more compact zero, where the top and bottom are nearly level. The large date version, however, has a taller zero that extends clearly below the rest of the digits. For the 1960 D penny, the small date variety is the rare one, and it's the one that collectors are after. But here's where the plot thickens. Some 1960 D pennies were struck using a leftover die that wasn't quite ready for prime time. This gave us something even more intriguing, a 1960 D small date over large date variety. That's right, a dual personality coin. You can actually see the large date peeking out from beneath the small date, if you look closely enough with a magnifier. Now, let's talk money. If you've got a regular 1960 D penny in decent condition, it's worth about its face value, 1 cent. But if you have a small date variety in uncirculated condition, that could fetch you anywhere from $10 to $30, depending on the grade. And if, by chance, you have the rare small date over large date variety, especially one in high grade, that coin has sold for as much as $3,000 at auction. Let me say that again, a single penny, worth $3,000. That's why coin collectors across America are checking their old jars, drawers, and coin rolls. Because these coins are still out there. They're hiding in plain sight. And they're waiting to be found. Now, let's talk a little history. In 1960, the mint was transitioning between different date styles to improve die longevity and strike clarity. As a result, they ended up using both styles that year, and that led to one of the most interesting penny stories in modern U.S. coinage. Denver produced most of the small date coins, while Philadelphia mainly produced the large date versions. But due to demand, mistakes happened. Dies got swapped, reused, or repolished, and these minting quirks gave us varieties and errors that collectors treasure today. Cut to close-up of a certified 1960 D small date penny in a grading slab. So, what should you do if you think you have one? First, grab a magnifying glass. Check the shape of the digits in the date, especially the zero. Is it short and stubby? Or is it tall and prominent? Compare it to known examples online. And if it looks promising, consider sending it to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC. A certified coin always sells for more and brings peace of mind to collectors. Also, be on the lookout for double dies and repunched mint marks. Some 1960 pennies have visible doubling on the date or mint mark, which can add to their value. In the world of coin collecting, stories like this remind us of something important. Value isn't always about gold or silver. Sometimes, it's about history. It's about rarity. It's about that little thrill you get when you realize you're holding a piece of the past that the world has almost forgotten. So the next time you're sorting through old change, or helping a grandchild with a penny collection, keep an eye out for the 1960 small date penny. You never know what treasure you might discover. Where every coin tells a story. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most overlooked yet fascinating coins from mid-century America, the 1966 copper penny. At first glance, it might seem like just another Lincoln cent. But as you'll soon find out, this coin has a history full of mystery, transition, and even a little controversy. So grab your magnifying glass, sit back, and let's explore what makes the 1966 penny a piece every collector should take a second look at. Let's go back to 1966. America was in the middle of major social and economic changes. The country was still feeling the effects of the coin shortage from the early 60s, and the U.S. Mint was under pressure to keep up with coin demand while battling hoarding and speculation. At the time, people were pulling silver coins out of circulation left and right. The Coinage Act of 1965 had just passed the year before, eliminating silver from quarters and dimes and reducing it in half dollars. In response, the Mint took several steps to manage the chaos, and this directly affected the way coins like the 1966 penny were produced. Now here's where things get interesting. From 1965 through 1967, the U.S. Mint removed all mint marks from coins. That means every 1966 penny you see, whether it was struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, will look exactly the same. No D for Denver. No S for San Francisco. Nothing Y. Because the Mint wanted to discourage coin hoarding. People had been collecting coins by mint mark, hoping they'd become valuable. By removing those marks, the Mint hoped Americans would stop stockpiling and start spending. So if you've got a 1966 penny, you won't be able to tell where it was made. And that adds a layer of mystery and history that many collectors find intriguing. The 1966 Lincoln penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. That's the classic bronze composition used since 1909 when the Lincoln cent first debuted. Now, here's a fun fact, that copper content makes these older pennies worth more than 1 cent, even just for their metal. In fact, as of today's copper prices, a single 1966 penny contains nearly 3 cents worth of copper. Of course, it's illegal to melt US coins for their metal, but it just shows how solid and valuable this little coin really is. Let's talk errors, because this is where things can really get exciting. Even though the 1966 penny wasn't produced with a mint mark, there are still error coins out there that collectors actively hunt for. One known variety is the double die. If you spot doubling on Lincoln's date or on the word Liberty, you might be holding something special. These errors happened when the coin's die struck the design more than once, slightly off-center each time. Another error that pops up occasionally is off-center strikes. These occur when the blank coin isn't properly aligned in the press, resulting in a coin that's missing part of the design. Depending on how far off-center it is, and how visible the date is, these errors can be worth anywhere from $20 to over $100. Then there's the ever-popular, clipped planchet error. That's when the coin is missing a curved section, almost like a bite was taken out of it. These can bring in a good amount from error collectors. So, what's a regular 1966 penny worth? Well, in circulated condition, most of them are worth just about face value, 1 cent. But if you've got one in uncirculated, mint state condition, you're looking at a value of 15 to 50 cents or more, depending on the grade. High-grade examples, especially those graded MS65 or higher, can fetch $2 to $5, sometimes more if the coin has particularly nice luster or color, and if you're lucky enough to find a genuine error coin. That's where the real money is. A strong double die or dramatic off-center strike could be worth anywhere from $50 to several $100s, depending on rarity and condition. You might be wondering, why would anyone care about a penny with no mint mark and no silver? Well, here's why the 1966 penny still matters to collectors. First, it's a key part of the transitional years from 1965 to 1967, a period of dramatic change in U.S. coinage. That alone makes it a great conversation piece in any collection. Second, it's a perfect example of how even a coin that's over 50 years old can still be found in pocket change today. That connection to the past, to history you can hold in your hand, is something older collectors truly appreciate. And lastly, because of its composition and historical context, the 1966 penny remains a small but mighty reminder of how much the world was changing, and how coins, in their own quiet way, tell that story. So next time you're sorting through an old coin jar or checking your change from the grocery store, keep an eye out for the 1966 penny. Look for signs of errors. Hold it up to the light and think about where it might have traveled over the last half-century. It may not be flashy, but the 1966 copper penny is a humble piece of American history, and in the world of coin collecting, that's worth a whole lot more than just 1 cent. We're taking a closer look at a coin that many of you might remember seeing in your change jar or pocket back in the day, the 1968 copper penny from the United States. At first glance, it may look like just another Lincoln cent. But behind that familiar profile of President Abraham Lincoln lies an intriguing story of history, minting changes, and collector interest. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you might just find yourself digging through your old change for one of these. Let's start with the basics. The 1968 penny was minted during a time of change for the U.S. Mint. The United States had just gone through the coin shortage crisis of the early 1960s, and the Mint was still adjusting. In 1968, the Lincoln cent was struck in copper, 95% copper and 5% zinc, just like it had been since 1962. It weighed 3.11 grams, but there's something that makes 1968 stand out, and that's the return of the S mint mark on circulating coins. For coin collectors, that meant the U.S. Mint in San Francisco was once again striking coins not just for proof sets, but for everyday USE. In 1968, there were actually 3 versions of the Lincoln penny: 1968 with no mint mark, made in Philadelphia. 1968 D, from the Denver Mint, and the 1968 S, struck in San Francisco. All 3 are made of copper, but not all of them are created equal. Now let's talk about mintage numbers. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 1 billion pennies in 1968. Denver? Even more, close to 2.9 billion. But the San Francisco Mint only produced about 258 million business strike cents. That makes the 1968 S the lowest mintage of the 3 for circulation, and naturally, the most sought after by collectors. But here's where things start to get really interesting. Some 1968 pennies have errors, and errors are what turn ordinary coins into treasures. One of the most talked about errors from 1968 is the double die. Now, these are rare, but they exist. On some 1968 S Lincoln cents, you can find doubling in the date, the word liberty, and sometimes even in the motto, "In God We Trust." If you spot one of these in good condition, you're not just holding a penny, you could be holding a coin worth hundreds, sometimes even thousands of dollars depending on the severity of the doubling and the coin's overall condition. There are also off-center strikes, coins struck on damaged planchets, or those with weak strikes that left parts of the design incomplete. Each of these errors adds collector interest and potential value. Now let's talk money. What is a 1968 copper penny worth today? In circulated condition, most 1968 pennies are worth just face value, maybe a few cents to $1 if they're in better shape. But coins in uncirculated, mint state condition, especially those graded MS 65 and above, can be worth significantly more. A high-grade 1968 S penny can fetch $20 to $50, and if it has a rare error, the price can go up exponentially. Proof coins struck in San Francisco for collectors, especially those that are flawless and graded PR 69 or higher, can be worth even more to the right buyer. Collectors still seek out the 1968 S penny for their Lincoln cent albums and registry sets. And because many people never saved these coins in pristine condition, high-grade examples are getting harder to come by. But beyond value, the 1968 penny represents a period of transition. It was a time when coin collecting was becoming more popular across the US, and when Americans were paying closer attention to the change in their pockets. The return of the San Francisco mint mark was a big deal. It was a reminder of the past, of an older era of coinage, and at the same time, a symbol that coin collecting had a future. So, if you've got a jar of old pennies sitting around, now's the time to take a closer look. You might find a 1968 S with some extra value. Check for those errors. Look at the condition. You never know, a penny from your childhood could turn out to be worth far more than 1 cent. If you're someone who loves digging through old jars of change or collecting those quiet little treasures from the past, then today's video is going to be right up your alley. We're about to talk about a coin that might look ordinary at first glance, but if you know what to look for, it could be a valuable piece of American history. That I'm talking about the 1970 copper penny. That's right, the Denver minted 1 cent coin from 1970 that's gotten a lot of attention over the years, some deserved, some misunderstood. But by the end of this video you'll know exactly why this coin matters, what makes it special, and how to tell if the one in your pocket change or coin collection might just be worth a small fortune. The year was 1970. The United States was in the midst of cultural and political shifts, the Vietnam War, civil rights movements, and the first Earth Day. While the world was changing fast, one thing stayed consistent: the penny. In 1970, the U.S. Mint produced Lincoln cents as usual. These coins were made primarily from copper, 95% copper and 5% zinc, to be exact. That's the same composition used since 1962. The Denver Mint struck over 2.8 billion pennies that year. So at first glance, you might think the 1970 Lincoln cent is just another common coin. But here's where things get interesting. Now, most 1970 pennies are only worth face value, especially in circulated condition. But a few rare varieties and errors have captured the attention of serious collectors. These are the coins we're going to focus on today. Let's start with the most sought-after variety, the 1970 small date, high 7. This isn't from Denver, but it's worth mentioning for comparison, because some people confuse it with the 1970 D. The Denver Mint didn't produce that small date variety, but certain era coins from Denver have their own unique appeal. There are two main reasons collectors hunt for the 1970 Lincoln cent: striking errors off metal planchet mistakes. Some rare 1970 pennies have been found struck on dime planchets. These coins are thinner, lighter, and slightly smaller than a standard penny. Because a dime is made of a copper-nickel clad composition, these era coins stand out with a lighter color and a different ring when dropped. Collectors also seek out double dies from this year. While double dies are more commonly associated with 1969 or 1972 cents, some subtle doubling can be found on 1970 coins, particularly in the motto, "In God We Trust," or the word "Liberty." These doubling effects can fetch higher prices depending on clarity and grade. So how much is a 1970 penny worth? If you've got a regular one in your pocket change, it's probably just worth a cent. But if you find a clean, uncirculated version, what collectors call mint state, you could be looking at a few dollars. In MS-65 red condition, these coins typically sell for between $5 and $15. But era coins? That's where things get interesting. That a 1970 penny struck on a dime planchet could bring in anywhere from $500 to over $2,000, depending on the condition. One even sold at auction for over $3,000. And if you come across a double die that's clearly visible and in good shape, that could bring in hundreds of dollars. Collectors are drawn to these coins not because they're flashy or big-ticket headliners, but because they tell a story of minting mistakes, careful observation, and patience. That if you're sorting through coins or buying rolls to search, keep these tips in mind when looking for valuable 1970 pennies. Check the weight. A normal penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If yours is significantly lighter, you might be holding an off-metal strike. Look closely at the edges. If the coin doesn't have the usual copper color or appears thinner, you may have a planchet error. Use a magnifying glass to check for doubling, especially on the lettering. If you think you found something special, don't clean the coin. Cleaning can reduce its value. Instead, take it to a professional for grading or verification. Lincoln cents have been around for over 100 years, and yet, some of the smallest changes, barely visible to the naked eye, can turn a common coin into a prized collectible. The 1970 D penny reminds us that value isn't always about rarity in numbers. It's about the unexpected. A coin you overlooked yesterday might be your next great discovery today. So the next time you're flipping through a pile of pennies, slow down a little. Take a closer look. That 1970 D copper penny might be more than just a piece of pocket change, it could be a story waiting to be told. We're diving deep into the world of a humble little penny that's anything but ordinary. I'm talking about the 1971 copper penny. You might have seen one before and thought, just another old penny. But this coin has secrets, surprises, and serious value for collectors, especially if you know what to look for. So grab your magnifying glass and settle in, because the story of the 1971 copper penny might just be the most surprising 1-cent tale you've heard in a while. Let's start from the beginning. The year was 1971. Gas was about 40 cents a gallon, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins to keep up with the growing economy. Among them, the Lincoln penny, a classic. This design, featuring Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, had already been around since 1959. Now, when we say 1971 the S stands for the San Francisco Mint. Back in those days, the San Francisco Mint was primarily focused on making proof coins, those shiny, mirror-like coins specially made for collectors. So, most 1971 Lincoln pennies were struck as proof coins. They were never meant to circulate. Instead, they came in special proof sets, sold directly to collectors. So what makes this penny so interesting? After all, they made over 3 million of these proof pennies at the San Francisco Mint. That doesn't exactly scream rare, does it? Well, it's not the quantity, it's the quality, and the errors. You see, among those millions of proof coins, some of them were struck with what collectors call a double die. A double die error means the coin was struck with a die that had a slight misalignment, causing some parts of the design, especially the lettering and the date, to appear doubled. And the 1971 double die obverse penny? That's a holy grail for error collectors. You can actually see the doubling on the words, Liberty, In God We Trust, and even the date, 1971. If you've got a sharp eye or a good magnifying glass, it's pretty clear once you spot it. Now here's where things get really exciting. If you happen to have a regular 1971 proof penny, it might be worth $1 or $2, maybe a little more if it's still in its original packaging and in perfect shape, but if you've got the double die version, buckle up. A genuine 1971 double die obverse penny can sell for hundreds, sometimes even thousands, of dollars depending on its condition. One top-graded example sold for over $3,000 at auction. Let me say that again, a 1-cent coin, that sold for over $3,000. That's what we call turning copper into gold, and yes, demand is still strong. Collectors today are always on the hunt for these errors, especially from the early 70s. They're rare, they're fun to find, and they tell a story about how even the most careful minting process can produce surprises. Now, let's say you have a 1971 penny. How do you know if it's the valuable double die version? First, make sure it's a proof coin. Proofs have a mirror-like finish and sharper details. If it looks dull and worn, it's probably a regular circulated coin. Second, get a magnifier, something at least 10x. Look at the lettering, especially Liberty and In God We Trust. If the letters look doubled or shadowed, you may have struck copper, and of course, if you think you've got a winner, take it to a professional coin dealer or send it to a coin grading service like PCGS or NGC. They can authenticate and grade it, and let you know exactly what it's worth. Here's a little side note for those who are new to coin collecting. Proof coins aren't just shinier, they're struck using a different process altogether. The dies are polished, and each coin is struck more than once to bring out the details. That's why they have that deep mirror finish and frosty design. So every 1971 proof penny started off as a special coin. But only a few ended up with the double die error, making them special among the special. So there you have it, the 1971 copper penny. A coin you could have bought in a proof set for just a few dollars back in the day, and now, depending on the era and condition, could be worth a small fortune. It's coins like this that remind us why we love collecting. Every penny tells a story, and sometimes, that story is worth thousands of dollars. Have you ever looked at a penny and thought, could this little coin be worth more than just 1 cent? Today, we're diving deep into a piece of American history, the 1973 copper penny. Now, at first glance, this coin might seem ordinary. But as we dig into its backstory, errors, collector demand, and current value, you might just start checking your pocket change a little more closely. So, grab your favorite chair, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and join me on a journey through the fascinating world of the 1973 penny. The year was 1973. America was in the midst of the Cold War, Vietnam was still making headlines, and gas was just 40 cents a gallon. Amidst it all, the Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of pennies, including the one we're talking about today, the 1973 copper Lincoln cent. Now, this coin was made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, the classic bronze composition used for most Lincoln cents before 1982. It featured Abraham Lincoln's bust on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a design that had been in place since 1959. The Denver Mint, designated by the little D mark just under the date, struck around 3.5 billion of these pennies that year. Yes, billion with a B. So, you might ask, what makes any of these coins special? Well, let's find out. Most 1973 pennies are only worth face value. They're common, found in jars, drawers, and coin rolls across the country. But here's where things get interesting. Collectors have discovered that not all 1973 pennies were struck equally. Some have unique minting errors, while others have retained incredible condition after more than 50 years. And in the world of coin collecting, even the smallest detail can mean the difference between pocket change and a payday point. One of the things that makes the 1973 penny intriguing to collectors are the possible errors. These aren't always easy to spot, but if you know what to look for, they can be quite valuable. Double die errors, where the coin's design appears doubled due to a misaligned die, have been reported, although they're not widespread. These errors usually show up in the date or in the lettering, like Liberty or In God We Trust. If you've got a 1973 penny that looks a little fuzzy around the edges, it might just be worth a second look under a magnifying glass. Off-center strikes and clipped planchets are also among the more interesting errors seen in this year's mintage. A coin struck off-center may show a crescent of blank metal, and depending on how much of the design is still visible, such errors can fetch anywhere from a few bucks to over $100, but the real jackpot. A 1973 penny in pristine, uncirculated condition, what collectors call MS-67 red, can sell for over $200. That's not bad for a coin that originally cost just a single cent. Today, collectors still hunt for high-grade 1973 Lincoln cents to complete their Lincoln cent albums. While circulated coins are common and typically only worth face value, coins with brilliant, original red luster and no scratches or wear are much more desirable. Graded examples, especially those certified by PCGS or NGC, command higher prices. In auction, one top-grade 1973 penny even reached over $400. Now, these are rare, but they prove one thing: the coin you overlook today might just be tomorrow's hidden treasure. Here's something fascinating: the 1973 penny is one of the last to be made entirely out of bronze. In just under a decade, due to the rising price of copper, the U.S. Mint would shift to a cheaper zinc composition with only a thin copper coating. So when you hold a 1973 penny, you're holding a small piece of America's economic history, a time when pennies were still made mostly of real copper. Also, here's a little tip for collectors: if you hear a slightly lower pitched ring when dropping a pre-1982 penny compared to a modern one, that's the sound of solid copper. To experienced ears, that ping is music. So there you have it, the story of the 1973 copper penny. It's a common coin with uncommon potential. Whether it's a minting error, high grade, or just a piece of history tucked away in your coin jar, this little cent is a quiet reminder of America's rich numismatic heritage. Now, before we get into the details of the coin's history, value, and any potential errors, let's talk about the year it was minted, the United States Bicentennial year. This was a time of great national pride as the country celebrated its 200th anniversary. To mark this occasion, the U.S. Mint produced a special series of coins, including quarters, half dollars, and even a special design on the reverse of the Eisenhower dollar. But don't be confused, the 1976 copper penny didn't have a special design for the bicentennial. So why does this coin still have value today? Well, it starts with the historical context. In 1976, the U.S. was dealing with high inflation, and the price of copper was on the rise. Because of this, many coins from this time period, including the penny, were made using a composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This copper content is part of the reason collectors still find interest in these pennies. Interestingly, the 1976 copper penny is not a rare coin by itself. Over 4 billion of them were minted at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. However, certain variations of the coin can be quite valuable. Some of the most sought-after 1976 pennies are those with unique errors. For example, there are reports of double dies, where the die used to strike the coin was misaligned, causing a doubling of the image. These errors can lead to a substantial increase in value, especially if they're in good condition. Now, let's talk about the value today. Most 1976 copper pennies in good condition are worth just a little above face value, around 2 to 3 cents. But if you happen to stumble upon one with an error, or if it's in excellent, uncirculated condition, the value can jump significantly. Some rare error coins have been known to sell for over $100, depending on the specifics of the error and how well the coin is preserved, but it's not just about the errors. The 1976 copper penny has become a beloved coin among collectors for its connection to a pivotal moment in American history. It's a tangible piece of the past that allows collectors to hold a little piece of the bicentennial celebrations. It also holds a certain nostalgic value for older collectors who might remember the events surrounding the 200th anniversary of the United States. Now, let's talk about demand. If you're a collector of pennies or rare coins, the 1976 copper penny is something you want to keep an eye on. With the constant interest in coin collecting, especially among those who are looking for coins tied to significant moments in history, the 1976 penny is certainly a coin that could appreciate in value over time, especially if any new errors or interesting variations are discovered. One last interesting fact to keep in mind is that the U.S. Mint stopped using pure copper in pennies in 1982, opting instead for a copper-plated zinc composition to save on costs. So, the 1976 copper penny represents the end of an era for the U.S. Mint's penny production. This historical significance only adds to its appeal for collectors. To wrap up, while the 1976 copper penny might not be the rarest coin out there, it holds a special place in the hearts of many collectors. Its connection to the bicentennial year, its copper composition, and the potential for valuable errors make it a coin worth keeping an eye on. Who knows? You might have a hidden treasure in your collection without even realizing it. Let's start by looking at the coin itself. The 1980 copper penny, like many other pennies from the time, was struck by the United States Mint. It weighs 3.11 grams and has a diameter of 19 millimeters. This penny is composed primarily of copper, which is significant when we compare it to today's pennies, which are made of a copper-plated zinc mixture. The obverse of this coin features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner, and the reverse shows a simple design of a shield with the inscription, 1 cent, and a stylized wheat design, which, by the way, was used until 1958 before being replaced with the Lincoln Memorial. Now, while this coin may seem just like any other penny you've seen, there's more to its story. The 1980 copper penny is a part of an important transitional period in U.S. coinage history. Before 1982, pennies were struck with 95% copper and 5% zinc. However, rising copper prices and economic factors led to a change in the composition of pennies starting in 1982, replacing the copper core with mostly zinc, coated with copper. So, any copper penny from 1980 and earlier is more valuable as a raw material compared to later pennies. You might be wondering, is the 1980 copper penny worth anything today? Well, in terms of face value, it's just 1 cent. However, due to the high copper content, it has a certain intrinsic value, especially with copper prices fluctuating over the years. As of today, the copper content alone can make each 1980 penny worth around 2 to 3 cents in scrap copper, but hold on, there's more. If your 1980 penny has been well preserved, it could be worth more to collectors. While most 1980 copper pennies aren't going to fetch huge sums at auction, some in excellent condition or with certain error features might be worth a few dollars. But finding one in pristine condition? That's where the real story lies. Speaking of rare features, let's talk about errors. Collectors often look for coins that were struck with errors at the mint. A few 1980 pennies have been found with double strikes, where the coin was stamped twice, or with other rare variations like off-center designs. These errors can make the coin much more valuable. So, if you happen to come across a 1980 penny that looks a bit off, it could be worth more than just its face value, but remember, error coins are quite rare, and their value depends heavily on the type of error and its impact on the design. If you're lucky enough to find a rare error penny in your collection, you could be holding on to a very valuable piece of history. Collector demand. In the world of coin collecting, the 1980 copper penny isn't as famous as some of the earlier coins like the 1909 SVDB penny or the 1943 copper penny, but it still holds appeal for many collectors. Because of its composition and the fact that it was part of the last years before the penny's material change in 1982, it holds a certain charm. There is steady demand among collectors who appreciate coins with historical significance, and for those who are focused on collecting copper coins, the 1980 penny can be a great addition to their collection. Do you know that when the penny was first introduced in the US in 1793, it was much larger and heavier than the ones we use today? The penny has gone through many changes in size and design over the years, but it's fascinating to see how a simple coin can have such a rich history. The 1980 copper penny was one of the last of its kind, marking the end of an era. From 1982 onward, all pennies switched to the copper-plated zinc mixture, meaning the copper pennies from before are now considered a historical artifact of sorts. In conclusion, while the 1980 copper penny may not be worth a fortune at first glance, it's a piece of history that has its own unique value, both in terms of copper content and in the hearts of collectors. If you're lucky enough to have one in good condition or with any rare errors, it could be a hidden gem in your collection. The year 1988 marked an interesting period for the United States Mint. The country was still in the midst of transitioning from the heavy use of paper currency to a more coin-based economy, and the penny, especially the 1988 copper penny, would play a unique role in this era. Let's take a look at this coin story and see why it continues to intrigue collectors and history enthusiasts. To start, let's talk about the composition of the penny. By the time 1988 rolled around, the US Mint had already switched to using primarily copper-plated zinc in the production of pennies. This penny, however, was still very much a part of the pre-zinc era, a time when pennies were primarily made from 95% copper and only 5% zinc. The 1988 copper penny was part of the last series of US pennies to contain this higher percentage of copper. Just a few years later, the mint would change the composition of the penny to 97.5% zinc, with only a thin copper coating. So, if you're holding a 1988 copper penny, you're not just holding a coin, you're holding a piece of history that marks the final years of the classic copper pennies. Now, let's talk about something that makes this coin particularly exciting for collectors: minting errors. If you've been collecting coins for a while, you know that some of the most valuable and rare coins come from minting mistakes. The 1988 copper penny is no exception. Some 1988 pennies were minted with double strikes or off-center errors, making them extremely valuable to collectors. These errors happen because the coin was struck more than once, or the coin wasn't aligned properly when it was struck, which created a unique look and feel to the penny. Finding one of these errors in your collection could potentially increase the value of the coin significantly, but that's not all. There were also some pennies that came off the production line with extra metal around the edges or unusual die cracks. These types of imperfections make for fascinating specimens and are sought after by collectors who appreciate the rarity and uniqueness of these coins. Now, let's address the burning question: how much is a 1988 copper penny worth today? In its regular, uncirculated form, this penny is worth exactly 1 cent, just like any other penny you might find in circulation. But if you have a rare minting error, the value can increase dramatically. For example, a 1988 copper penny in excellent condition without any errors might fetch around 10 to 20 cents, as copper prices have fluctuated over the years. However, if you happen to have a coin with a double strike or other minting errors, the value could easily soar to hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on the specific error and condition of the coin. The most common 1988 pennies are worth just a little more than face value, but if you're lucky enough to find a coin with a unique feature or error, you could be holding a rare treasure. You may be wondering if collectors are interested in the 1988 copper penny. The answer is a resounding yes. As mentioned earlier, the last of the true copper pennies were minted in 1982, but many collectors still hold on to 1988 copper pennies, not just for their potential errors, but also because they mark a turning point in the history of American currency. Over time, these coins will only become more valuable, especially for those who understand the significance of owning a piece of U.S. coinage history. Many collectors seek out the 1988 copper penny because it represents a bridge between the classic copper era and the zinc-plated coins that followed. It is a coin that bridges the past with the future, and that's what makes it so compelling to collectors, particularly those with an interest in U.S. coinage and its evolution. Let's wrap up today's coin talk with a few fun facts about the 1988 copper penny that might surprise you. Presidential influence. The reverse side of the penny, showing the Lincoln Memorial, is part of a design that has been in circulation since 1959. This design was created by Frank Gasparo, and it remains one of the most iconic and beloved coin designs in U.S. history. While the U.S. Mint produces coins in a few locations around the country, the 1988 copper penny was primarily struck in Philadelphia. However, coins with the D mint mark, indicating that they were produced in Denver, are still fairly common. The 1988 penny is the last true copper penny in circulation. As time goes on, its historical significance will only grow, especially as collectors begin to appreciate its place in U.S. numismatic history. Did you know that the U.S. Mint has been exploring ways to reduce the environmental impact of coin production? The shift from copper to zinc was part of a long-term effort to reduce costs and environmental concerns, and the 1988 copper penny is a reminder of that era of change. There you have it, the 1988 copper penny. While it may look like just another penny in your collection, it's so much more than that. With its historical significance, potential minting errors, and collector demand, it is a coin that continues to captivate coin enthusiasts. Whether you're new to collecting or an experienced numismatist, the 1988 copper penny is a great addition to any collection. If you're an older coin enthusiast, especially someone with a keen interest in pennies, stick around because this little penny might just have more to offer than you think. The 1991 D copper penny was minted at the Denver Mint, as indicated by the D mint mark. While the penny itself isn't exactly rare in the sense of low mintage, its place in history is important. The 1991 D penny belongs to the Lincoln Memorial series, which ran from 1959 until 2008. These pennies are made primarily of copper, which, of course, gives them a distinctive look and feel compared to the newer zinc pennies we see today. In terms of design, the 1991 penny features the famous image of Abraham Lincoln, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. This design, with the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse side, has been a hallmark of American numismatics for decades. But beyond the surface, there's more to this coin than meets the eye. The 1991 D penny was produced in large quantities, with a total mintage of over 7.7 billion coins that year. So, in terms of numbers, this is not one of those ultra-rare pennies that collectors dream about. However, just because there are a lot of them doesn't mean they don't have value. It's the unique characteristics, potential errors, and the historical significance that make these pennies interesting to collectors. One important thing to note is that while the majority of these pennies are in circulation, their copper composition, mostly 95% copper and 5% zinc, means they are a step away from the modern-day pennies, which have a zinc core with a copper-plated exterior. This copper content, although seemingly common, is actually part of what has made these older pennies so intriguing to many collectors. Now, here's where things get exciting for coin collectors. The 1991 D copper penny isn't just a regular penny, it can sometimes hold errors that make it more valuable. Error coins are always in high demand, and the 1991 D is no exception. One notable error that occasionally turns up is the double die error. This occurs when the design on the coin is stamped more than once, causing a doubling effect on the images, especially around the date or the lettering. If you happen to find a 1991D penny with a double die, hold on to it. These coins can fetch quite a bit more than the standard version. While the 1991D isn't known for having a massive number of errors, spotting one with unique features could be a game changer for your collection. As of today, the 1991D copper penny, in its regular condition, typically holds a value of just 1 cent. However, for those who collect with a sharp eye for detail, the value can go up significantly if you find one with a rare error or in mint condition. A penny in perfect, uncirculated condition can be worth several dollars, especially if it shows no signs of wear and tear. For example, if you have a 1991D penny that has been well preserved over the years, it could be worth around 50 cents to $1 or more to the right collector. If you find one with an error, such as the double die, its value could skyrocket to much higher figures depending on the severity and prominence of the error. So why are collectors so interested in the 1991D copper penny? Well, the penny has become a bit of a nostalgic symbol for many Americans. Those of you who grew up during this time remember the days when pennies were made of copper, and coins like the 1991D were used in everyday transactions. For many older collectors, this coin represents a link to the past. Moreover, the appeal of this penny isn't just about its current value but its potential. As more pennies are removed from circulation and hoarded by collectors, the rarity of finding well-preserved versions continues to grow. This makes coins like the 1991D an interesting piece of history, and for some, a smart investment for the future. The year 1991 was a time of change in the U.S., with the Gulf War taking place and significant shifts in American culture. The 1991 penny, then, isn't just a coin, it's a small piece of history that represents the era. This was one of the last years when pennies were primarily made of copper before the composition changed in 1982. So, it's part of a transitional period in American coinage that makes it particularly special for collectors. Abraham Lincoln has graced the U.S. penny since 1909, and the 1991D is no exception. It's one of the last coins minted before the Lincoln Memorial design was replaced by the Union Shield in 2010. So, there you have it. The 1991D copper penny might seem like a small and humble coin, but when you take a closer look, you can see the history, the potential for rare errors, and the value that this seemingly ordinary penny holds for collectors. Whether you're holding on to a pristine version or hoping to spot an error coin, this little piece of U.S. currency is far more interesting than it appears at first glance. That if you've got a 1991D copper penny tucked away in your collection, it might be time to take another look at it. Who knows, you could have a valuable treasure in your hands. To understand the value of the 1994 copper penny, we need to take a trip back in time. The penny, as we know it, was first introduced by the U.S. Mint in 1793. Over the years, this humble coin has gone through many changes, both in design and in the metal composition. The penny you're likely most familiar with, the one made from 95% copper and 5% zinc, was standard until 1982. However, by 1982, due to the rising costs of copper, the U.S. Mint switched the penny's composition to 97.5% zinc, with only 2.5% copper coating. But that change didn't happen all at once. The transition took place over the course of the year, and so in 1994, the vast majority of pennies were still made of the newer, zinc-based composition. Now, here's where things get interesting. When you hear 1994 copper penny, you might be thinking, but wait, didn't they stop making copper pennies after 1982? Well, you're right, most pennies after that time are made of zinc with a copper plating. However, there are still some 1994 pennies that contain that sought-after 95% copper content. These are very rare, and they weren't supposed to exist. You see, there were some leftover copper blanks from the earlier years that, by mistake, were used in the 1994 production. These coins are often referred to as copper-plated or copper alloy because they contain the older, heavier copper content. And this mistake made these pennies incredibly valuable for collectors. When it comes to rare coins, errors can often lead to significant value. And the 1994 copper penny is no exception. Collectors who find one of these copper-containing pennies are in for a treat, because they are not only rare, they are highly coveted, but here's the catch, these errors aren't always easy to spot. While most 1994 pennies are made with the modern zinc core, the copper ones look virtually identical to their zinc counterparts. That's why it's so important for collectors to be diligent in searching through their collections and coin rolls. So, if you come across a 1994 penny and it feels heavier or you notice a slight difference in color compared to others, you might just be holding a piece of rare American history. If you're wondering how much these rare 1994 copper pennies are worth today, let's take a closer look. While a standard 1994 penny, made of zinc, is worth only 1 cent, the copper-era pennies can fetch anywhere from $20 to $100 or more, depending on the condition, rarity, and whether they've been authenticated. In mint condition, some of these pennies can be sold for even more at auction. And if you happen to come across one with a major error or misprint, the value could increase exponentially. So, if you have a 1994 penny tucked away in a jar or a coin collection, it might be time to inspect it more closely. Even the smallest of mistakes in minting can lead to huge financial rewards. So, why is there such a strong demand for the 1994 copper penny, and why are collectors willing to pay top dollar for it? The reason is simple: rarity and historical significance. Coin collectors know that errors and unusual variations make coins more desirable. The 1994 copper penny is a great example of this. Because these error coins were produced by mistake, they are one of a kind, and their scarcity has driven up their market value. For coin enthusiasts, finding a penny that isn't like the others feels like discovering a hidden treasure. In recent years, the demand for rare coins has only increased, with collectors eager to complete their sets or find valuable coins that could appreciate over time. So, if you're looking to make a profit, the 1994 copper penny is an excellent addition to your collection, as long as you know how to spot the error. Let me share a few interesting facts that make the 1994 copper penny even more fascinating. Did you know that in 2009, the U.S. Mint did a special issue of pennies to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth? These special edition coins were designed to reflect different stages of Lincoln's life, and collectors consider them highly valuable today. And here's another fun fact: even though the copper penny is no longer in circulation, it still holds sentimental value for many Americans. There's something about the familiar copper color and the weight of the coin that takes us back to simpler times. And for older collectors, it's a reminder of a bygone era when pennies were truly made of copper. To wrap things up, the 1994 copper penny might seem like an ordinary coin, but to collectors and enthusiasts, it holds incredible value. Whether you're looking to add to your collection or just want to learn more about this fascinating piece of American history, now you know the story behind this rare find. So, take a moment to check your coin jars, roll through your spare change, and who knows, you might just stumble upon a 1994 copper penny that could turn into a small fortune. In the world of coin collecting, pennies might seem like small potatoes, but don't be fooled, some of these humble copper coins can be surprisingly valuable. And the 2006 copper penny is one of them. To fully understand its worth, we need to take a step back and explore the coin's history, its minting year, any potential errors, and its current demand among collectors. The 2006 copper penny is part of the iconic Lincoln penny series, which has been in circulation since 1909. But what makes the 2006 penny stand out? Well, for starters, it was minted during a time when the U.S. Mint was transitioning its materials. You see, the U.S. penny had undergone several changes throughout the years, especially when it came to the metal content. By 1982, the penny's composition was changed to a copper-plated zinc, and this continued into the 2000s. However, for those collectors looking for copper pennies, those made before the switch to zinc, the 2006 is a rare find, especially in terms of quality. The D on the coin signifies that it was minted in Denver, which is important because Denver is known for producing a significant number of coins that end up in collectors' hands. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the 2006 penny. This coin was struck with a composition of 97.5% copper and 2.5% zinc, a composition that was phased out just a few years later. This makes the 2006 penny a part of a rapidly vanishing group of coins. Over the years, copper has become more valuable, and pennies like this one, made with a higher copper content, have gained attention from both collectors and investors alike. As we know, error coins can significantly increase a coin's value. And the 2060 copper penny is no exception. Though errors on this particular coin are relatively rare, they do exist. One of the most sought-after varieties includes coins that were improperly struck, resulting in double strikes or misalignments. These types of errors can make a 2060 penny much more valuable, depending on the severity and clarity of the mistake. One common error that collectors are looking for is the off-center strike. When a coin is struck incorrectly, you can see part of the design missing or shifted, making it a valuable find. If you come across a 2060 penny with such an error, hold on to it, because it could be worth a lot more than its face value. So, what's the value of a 2060 copper penny today? Well, most 2060 pennies are worth their face value, just 1 cent. However, it's important to note that the value can increase if the coin is in excellent condition, graded as MS-65 or higher. When you're talking about mint condition coins, they could fetch anywhere from 50 cents to $1 at auction, but that's not all. If you're lucky enough to have a rare error coin, its value could shoot up to several $100s, depending on the type of error and the condition of the coin. In fact, collectors are particularly interested in well-preserved 2060 pennies because of the dwindling supply of copper pennies. Over the years, more and more of these coins have been removed from circulation, so finding one in pristine condition is a real treasure. So, why is there such demand for this particular coin? Aside from the material composition, there's a growing trend of interest in coins with historical significance. Collectors are drawn to coins like the 2060 copper penny because it marks the end of an era. As the U.S. Mint moved towards cheaper materials, copper pennies like the 2060 are now seen as a piece of history, a reminder of the days when coins were made with more precious metals. Another factor contributing to the coin's popularity is its connection to the Lincoln penny series. The Lincoln penny has long been a symbol of American history, and with each passing year, the older coins become more valuable as they become harder to find. Now, let's wrap things up with a few fun facts about the 2060 copper penny. Did you know that the 2060 penny features the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner? This portrait has graced the coin since its introduction in 1909 and remains one of the most recognizable coin designs in the world. Also, while many coins are minted in large quantities and end up in circulation without much fanfare, the 2060 penny was produced in huge numbers. Over 4 billion were made. So, while it might be common in appearance, it's the high-quality ones or those with rare errors that hold true value. In conclusion, the 2060 copper penny may not seem like much at first glance, but when you look at its history, its unique composition, and its growing rarity, it's easy to see why it has captured the attention of coin collectors. Whether you're a seasoned numismatist or just starting your collection, this coin is one that shouldn't be overlooked. So, next time you come across a 2060 penny, take a moment to inspect it closely. You might just have a hidden gem on your hands. And who knows, that simple copper penny could end up being worth more than you ever imagined. The year is 2014. In the world of coins, it was an ordinary year for the U.S. Mint. Pennies were still being struck with a copper-plated zinc core, just like they had been for decades. However, when we look closer at the 2014 copper penny, things start to get a little more interesting. This coin is part of the iconic Lincoln series, which has been in circulation since 1909. The obverse side features the famous portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. If you take a look at the reverse, you'll notice the familiar shield design, which has graced the back of pennies since 2010. But, what sets the 2014 penny apart from its predecessors? Well, it all comes down to the composition. For most of the 20th century, pennies were made primarily of copper, but that changed in the 1980s. By 1982, pennies were composed of 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper, with a thin copper plating. The 2014 penny, like those from the years before it, continued this trend. However, many collectors believe that the 2014 penny's copper-plated surface and age may give it a slight edge over other years. More on that in just a bit. You might be wondering, what makes the 2014 penny worth more than its face value? Well, it's important to understand a few things about coin collecting. While most 2014 pennies are not worth much beyond 1 cent, certain variations or imperfections can make them quite valuable. For example, if you happen to find a 2014 penny with a minting error, you could be looking at a significantly higher value. Some of the most common errors in coins like the 2014 penny include double strikes, off-center strikes, and die cracks. These rare mistakes can increase the value of a coin by hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars, depending on the severity of the error and the condition of the coin. The demand for such coins among collectors is strong. They are always on the lookout for pennies with unique characteristics. This has helped coins like the 2014 copper penny maintain their value as collectible items. Even without errors, the 2014 penny still holds some appeal because it represents a specific moment in history, the last years of the copper-plated pennies before the mint began experimenting with alternative materials. So, how can you identify a potentially valuable 2014 penny? It all starts with paying close attention to the details. Here's what you should look for. As mentioned earlier, the most valuable 2014 pennies are those with minting errors. A double strike, for example, happens when a penny is struck more than once by the dies. This results in a blurry or doubled image on the coin, making it stand out. Another common error is the off-center strike, where the design is not perfectly aligned on the coin. These errors can make the coin much more appealing to collectors and, therefore, more valuable. Just like with any coin, the condition of the 2014 penny plays a significant role in its value. A coin that is well preserved, free from scratches, and has a shiny finish is more valuable than one that is heavily worn. So, be sure to inspect the penny carefully before deciding whether or not it's a keeper for your collection. Although the 2014 penny isn't made entirely of copper, it still has a noticeable copper-plated exterior. This copper content can also contribute to its desirability among collectors. Some believe that copper is a more durable material, and as time passes, the rarity of copper pennies could increase. Now, let's take a step back and reflect on some interesting facts that make the 2014 copper penny more than just a coin in your pocket. The 2014 penny marks the end of a certain era in U.S. coinage. By the mid-2010s, there was a lot of talk about the rising cost of producing pennies, especially given the rising price of copper and zinc. Some experts believe that we may eventually see a move toward discontinuing the penny altogether. This makes coins like the 2014 penny even more valuable to collectors who want to preserve a piece of history. The penny is the only U.S. coin that features a president's image on the obverse side. Abraham Lincoln, a revered figure in American history, has been the face of the penny since 1909. So, when you hold a 2014 penny in your hand, you're holding a coin with a rich history, one that honors the legacy of one of America's greatest presidents. The final years of the copper penny. Although the penny was never truly made of pure copper after 1982, the 2014 penny still carries that historical connection to the copper-filled past. It's part of a series of coins that will always remind us of a time when copper was more commonly used in U.S. currency. As the years go by, the demand for specific coins tends to fluctuate. But, there is one thing that remains constant: collectors' love for rare and unique coins. The 2014 copper penny, while not necessarily a highly sought-after coin on its own, can become a prized possession if it's in excellent condition or features a rare minting error. As collectors continue to look for valuable coins to add to their collections, the 2014 penny could very well increase in value over time. So, if you have any of these pennies in your collection, keep an eye on them. Who knows, that little copper penny you have stashed away could one day be worth much more than its original face value. So, the next time you're going through your pocket change or rummaging through old coin jars, take a moment to look at that 2014 copper penny. It might look like just another ordinary coin, but it could hold more value than you think. Whether it's an error coin or simply a well-preserved example, this penny is a small piece of American history that could very well be a hidden gem in your collection. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more captivating stories about rare and valuable coins. Who knows what treasures you might discover next? Happy collecting, and I'll see you in the next video.